Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. I've got John with me today to talk about Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback out of LSU. John, this Nussmeier is probably the other guy that's had at least like top 3 round discussion around him. I think most people have him as QB3 in this draft. Maybe some people have him as QB2. But yeah, excited to talk about Nussmeier with you today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. This was, I think, of the ones we've talked about so far, he was the toughest eval for me. Took me the longest to kind of like get my thoughts together. So I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about him.
Yeah, likewise. I think this one is a tougher one. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I said I think this is the evaluation I feel the worst about in terms of Simpson probably has a wider range of outcomes than Nussmeier does from a ceiling perspective, but I think Nussmeier is just a difficult one to parse through the film on. You've got an injury this year. Things kind of fell apart for LSU this year. So how much do you look back at the 24 tape? How much do you weigh some of the intangibles with Nussmeier? There's a lot there, and I think it makes it more difficult to evaluate. But we'll do our best to provide some insight on him today. So let's start by just getting into the player like we always do. Let's start with the throwing for Nussmeier. I think this is probably the most exciting part of his game. There's NFL level stuff in terms of his throwing, and we'll get into that in more detail. But John, what stands out to you the most about Nussmeier's ability to play from the pocket and throw the ball?
Yeah, well, you mentioned playing from the pocket. I think that his movement to stay in the pocket and his like quick adjustments is of the three guys we've talked about. I think it's the best, better than Mendoza even, who was not bad at that. Nussmeier definitely wants to play from the pocket. Is not really looking to take off. But I think you also see him like he's kind of got a little bit of a gunslinger mentality, and I think that's why he wants to stay in the pocket to like give himself the most opportunity to really push the ball downfield. And I think for the most part that really helps his game. He kind of excels when he's able to just stand in there and let it rip.
Yeah, I think what you said about pocket movement and finding creative throwing windows, I agree. I think this is like super high level stuff that you see. He has like as good of a feel for when a guy's about to break open and how he can kind of leverage where his offensive linemen are positioned compared to the D line and just find a small enough window to get a throw off and still deliver the ball at least close to on time. And a lot of those throws are 10 to 20 yards down the field. Like it's legitimate big boy NFL throws. He's interesting in terms of his ability to do that because he's not a great athlete. Like
Yeah.
you even see it on those plays where it's like the throws don't look very good when they come out of his hand. Like they'll wobble like a duck, or it'll take a really long time for the ball to get there. I mean, there's some throws that
Yeah.
he really floats on tape,
Yeah.
but he sees the field really well and he understands where he needs to place the ball. And I don't know, like this is something I was going back and forth on for a while about like, do I feel like this is a good thing or a bad thing? But when you watch him, it feels like he throws to windows more than he throws to players. Like he just if he is confident about what he's seeing from the defense, there are times where he'll throw down the field and the receiver might have to slow down and dive or make an adjustment to try to make a play on the ball. And it feels like an inaccurate throw, and to some degree it is. Like you'd rather it just be on the money. But almost every time the throw is still keeping the receiver away from potential defenders and the ball doesn't get defended. So it's I don't know. It's like you weigh it good and bad. I think it's really impressive, like his ability to see defenses and understand where the ball needs to be placed based off of that.
Yeah, you're touching on a lot of the things that I wrote in my notes. Like, I think going back to like his arm is like it's good enough. Like he has enough to like get by in the NFL,
Yeah.
but he definitely has some limitations there. But I really don't think. I think that the way that he plays, you talked about anticipating and throwing into open windows. I think if you're gonna have an average arm, you have to be good at those things, and he is. And I think that, we talk about arm talent a lot. We talked about arm talent with guys like Cam Ward, with guys like Caleb Williams, with Drake May, like guys who can like really sling it and have much stronger arms, can get a lot more on the ball. They definitely have arm talent, but I think Nussmeier has arm talent in a different way where, to your point, he understands where those windows are going to be, and he actually he plays he plays different speeds with the ball really well, where there are a lot of times he puts air under the ball, and like if you're watching another quarterback, there's no way they're putting air under that ball. Like they're ripping it in there. But the way that he does it and where he's leading his receivers to, it actually works for him. And at times it can lead them, especially on like deep crossers. He did this all the time, where he's like waiting and waiting, and the window is later than other guys would throw it, and then he loops the ball into the window, and the guy has a running start into it and catches it, and is able to pick up more yards after the catch. So I thought that was like, although he doesn't have a good arm or like a great arm, he's got enough on it, and the way that he plays, it actually works really well together.
Yeah, we'll look at a throw on one of the clips that I'll talk about is an example of what you talked about really like lengthening the window down the field and leading his guy out to make a play. I think what you said about throwing with different speeds and velocities, throwing with touch, is a big advantage of his game. When you compare it to like Simpson, I think you see a significant difference in his ability to throw at different speeds with different with different degrees of touch. Simpson clearly has a more talented arm than Nussmeier does, so there's some trade-offs that you're making there in comparing these two guys, but generally you do see with Nussmeier there's a lot there from the throwing that's creative and pretty advanced for a college quarterback. One thing that you mentioned that I think is worth exploring a little bit more, and this is something like I just don't know if we're really going to have the answer to. You mentioned the arm strength just isn't great. We've kind of talked about that already. He was playing through like an oblique injury for what seems like pretty much the entire season this past year, and basically just refused to rest and heal up until LSU's season was pretty much over, and it just didn't make sense to keep trotting him out there for a mediocre LSU team and potentially risk further injury. And it's difficult to parse, are some of the struggles he's having throwing the ball, getting velocity on the ball, because every time he tries to rotate and generate force, it feels like he's getting a gunshot to the side of his body. Like, it's really hard to weigh that, and like only he probably knows how much that's limited him. But I do think it's something worth considering, that if one of my biggest questions is, how much power can you generate, and you had an injury the whole year that directly impacts that, it at least gives me maybe a little more hope that could improve in the future when he gets healed up and is fully ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think when you go back to like previous seasons, like 2024, like it is better. It's not like great tools.
Yep.
But I think that there is a little bit more to work with there in 24, and then you see like some of the play style is still very much the same for him. Like he really was the same player the last like 2 or 3 years. So I think that like when you're projecting forward, if you think, okay, this injury concern is not gonna like be lasting or chronic in the NFL, it was a one-time thing, we think that he's going to be fine, I think that would alleviate some of the concerns about arm strength, and at least like make you feel a little more comfortable about like he has enough to work with in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I went back to a few games from the 24 tape. I did not come away from it thinking that the injury was fully explaining the lack of arm strength. It's not drastic from 24 to 25. I think you probably see a few times where down the field he puts a throw on a line more so in 24 than he does in 25, but it's clearly still not a plus skill for him. So I agree. I don't think it's a situation where I'm just willing to write off the concerns you saw in 25 and fully explain that away due to the injury. But yeah, it's something to keep in mind for sure. Both these guys, Simpson and Nussmeier, were limited to some degree throughout this past season. And so like you have to take it into account when you're considering their film.
Yeah. Well, and since we're talking about him with Simpson there, I think the size is also relevant to bring up because they're roughly the same size, at least on paper. Interestingly, Nussmeier is about 10 pounds lighter, but I don't think it looks that way on film. And I think part of that, we didn't talk about this, but Simpson, some of his injury issues last year, apparently he had lost a lot of weight throughout the year. So I think when you look at them, Simpson looks a little lankier, but realistically, they're like roughly the same size. Nussmeier's maybe a little bit smaller as far as just pure weight. Um, and I think that is always going to be a little bit of a negative for them. Like, and one of the reasons that specifically for Nussmeier, he really can't get as much on the ball as like 6'5", 235-pound Fernando Mendoza. But I do think that he has a really good, like, quick release, and I think that helps him at least make up some of his deficiencies to at least get by.
Yeah, he looks denser than like the
He
203 listed weight would make you think. I do think some of it is like you see him navigate muddy pockets a lot and work around that, where it does feel like, this guy's a little scrappier than his size would indicate. But I do think you have to consider it. Like, guys that are at this size do just get hurt more often. He was hurt throughout his college career, so you saw examples of that with him. It's certainly something you have to keep in mind with him, and I would not anticipate that he just has a clean bill of health throughout his career. Most guys don't, but the size makes a big difference there. Okay, let's talk a little more about maybe some of the other aspects of the throwing for him. One thing that I do think he was pretty good at overall, I thought he was a pretty calm, short thrower. Like, you see a lot of the touch on those throws where he understands when he doesn't need to do too much to just pick up a solid gain and keep the chains moving. It's not a Mendoza where it's just like every slant is hitting the receiver exactly where their hands are placed and they're getting perfect yak every single time. It's not that level, but he gets to the check down pretty well in terms of accuracy. There's times where he probably should just take the check down because he's a very aggressive decision maker in general. But that part of his game, I think, is solid and is more so a question of the decision making more than it is like an ability to hit those throws.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Like, I thought overall, especially coming off Simpson's tape, I found that he was like pretty accurate, and his placement was a lot better than some of the stuff that we saw like consistently with Simpson. But you brought up Mendoza. It is not to that level. Like, Mendoza definitely is like far and away the best in this class, and and overall like very good at always exactly like where you want the throw to go to. Nussmeier, he missed his spots at times, but like generally he was still accurate with the ball and could get it to who he was trying to throw to. And I think overall, like, just as a passer, I thought that he was actually very good. And I think, when you talk about some of these guys, you're trying to project forward, like, okay, what could they clean up? What could they work on? I think that, like, right now, just as a pure passing quarterback, like actually throwing the football, Nussmeier he is in a good spot moving into his NFL journey.
Yep, I agree. Just like Simpson, Nussmeier also has the coach's son background. His dad was a college and NFL offensive coordinator. I do think overall he will be graded as a plus on the intangibles. I think at LSU everybody loved him. He wore the number 18, which is kind of their like big captain's signifier number there at LSU. He fought through injury the entire year when they weren't very good. He stuck around to sit behind Jade Daniels for multiple years when other guys might have left to pursue playing time somewhere else. Overall, I think Nussmeier seems to be a positive character guy and a guy that, like, if he was your backup for 5 years, like, you're going to be happy with his contributions to the room and all those sorts of things. So I think all of that is positive.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on one other thing there. I feel like generally that translated to the field too, where like
Yeah.
you could see a lot of similarities with like both of him and Simpson and Mendoza, like all being like the leaders on their team and like inspiring the guys around them and everything. I think Simpson, what we talked about a little bit was like a little bit of panic at times on the field. I didn't really feel that at all, Nussmeier. Like very typically felt very calm on the field, and he had a really short memory. Like whenever things weren't going well, like it almost didn't matter. Like he was going to come back and be like his same self on the next drive. You know, it didn't matter if he threw like a terrible crossbody interception. He was going to keep pushing the ball and like keep playing. And I think that was part of his leadership, was like the guys were not only buying in the locker room, but also on the field, that like, hey, this guy is going to like give us a chance.
Yeah, he's an extremely competitive player. And like you saw that through his willingness to play through injury. You see it on the tape sometimes, even just like he'll just nail a throw down the field and he's like super jacked up coming off the field after they've scored. Yeah. Like it's clearly a big part of his game. Okay. Couple more like positives for him before we get to the negatives that I'm not sure we've like fully hit on. And let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the questions around like plus traits. Specifically the ability to throw on the run and then like some of his deep ball ability. I would say both of these things are solid but not great. Like he's a okay deep ball thrower. Like we said earlier, like he's not a guy that's just going to rip a 50-yard throw on the line, but he overall has, solid accuracy there. I also think I thought he threw on the run pretty well. He's just not a crazy enough athlete to generate a ton of velocity, but I think he knows how to use his body on the run to make throws about as well as a guy can do. You see so many times where like he just understands how to position his body and his legs and everything to like find a throwing window, but also generate enough power to get the ball to where it needs to go. Similar to his creativity within the pocket of doing that. Like you do see some of that carry outside of the pocket as well. That's another thing. It's kind of the flip side of Simpson, where like when Simpson would get out to the pocket, sometimes you're just like, what is going on here? Like what's the what's the plan? What are we doing? Like Nussmeier, you don't really feel that way. Outside of, which we'll get to, some just absolutely like inexcusable, like horrible decisions. Like the risk calculation sometimes is just awful with Nussmeier. But like with snap to snap, I see it with Nussmeier a lot more in terms of the mental process outside of the pocket.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, as an athlete, he's not one that you want to, like, really be putting on the move too much. You definitely want to build a pocket and let him play from the pocket. But LSU, they had him doing it a good bit, like rollouts and sprint outs. And they one of their favorite plays, I don't know how many times I saw it, was like a counter with the tight end leaking backside. And he's rolling out, sprinting out, and the tight end is there. It was Mason Taylor specifically. It was like a lot back in 2024. Mason Taylor was there to catch those and like try to generate some yak. And I thought on those, like Nussmeier, he feels really natural at that. Even though he's not a very good athlete, you talked about like his ability to just kind of know what to do with his body. I think you saw it, and you kind of said this too. You see it in the pocket where like he's actually pretty flexible to like get his arm and get his body into throwing windows and like change platforms to throw from. And I think that really translated well to throwing on the run when they asked him to do it. So not something that I think you'd want to ask him to do all that much, just because he's not a good enough athlete to like really outrun defensive linemen in the NFL. Like you don't want to put him in that position pretty consistently, but like if you ask him to do it a handful of times, I don't think you'll be hurt by it. Like I think he'll be able to do it in the NFL.
Agreed. All right, I got nothing to add there. I think we hit it pretty well. Let's move on to some of the concerns with Nussmeier. The first major one we probably should hit on again. We talked about it a little bit, but like the size is a concern, and you wonder like on some of these throws where he's having to be so creative in the pocket to create throwing windows, if this guy was Fernando Mendoza's size, would he have just got the ball out and not had to move? Like, those are legit questions, and you see him have to do it enough on the tape where I think it's like, okay, this, it's impressive he can navigate it with the size that he's at, but you still would rather it just look easier, and I think it would if you had a guy that was bigger. That I think, general point is just physically, it's just not going to blow you away pretty much at any level. He gets by with a lot of his skill and his mental ability, but in general, it's just there's very little that's a major plus on the physical traits.
Yeah, I think that he's a guy, if he had another like couple of inches and like 20 more pounds, and you saw like the arm strength benefit from just being bigger physically, like he would be in that first round conversation, I think. But because of his like severe limitations and the way that it impacts him like playing on the field, I think that it led to some of his like poorer moments. The way that I was trying to think about it, or the way that I ultimately came up with thinking about it, he has very limited physical tools, but he plays like somebody who has much better physical tools.
Yeah.
Like he kind of plays like he's Matt Stafford out there, or someone with that kind of arm, and he does not have those kind of physical tools. And I think that's like the biggest thing that he needs to change in his game, is dialing that back a little bit and understanding a little bit better who he is and how he wins.
Yeah, and in that, like, some of the limitations you see there are like when he's having to adjust and he can't step into a throw, there's just not velocity on the ball. He doesn't. I think there's times where he should step into a throw more, and he gets in some bad habits of like, hey, you actually could put more velocity on the ball here. There's not a defender breathing down your neck, and you're still kind of throwing it with a little bit less solid footwork and velocity behind the ball. There's also just no, like, I don't know if I remember really any like deep ball lasers on his tape, which is something like on Mendoza's tape, even some Simpson plays, you just see it a lot more often. And I think LSU did a good job of like tailoring their offense to what Nussmeier wanted to do, from like you see him attacking over the intermediate middle of the field. I feel like every LSU team just runs like, I just picture like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson running like the slot fade out of the.
They ran so many slot. Like we talked
every
about it with
year.
Jaden Daniels a few years ago too, and like I was watching Nussmeier. It's like they're just running slot fades like every other play. It was so funny.
Yeah. It honestly didn't feel that different from a lot of the Daniels stuff. Like still in a lot of empty. It was just the only difference was like Daniels would just watch the guy run across the middle of the field, and then just be like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna run." And Nussmeier is like, if there's a 1-inch window where the ball can fit over the middle of the field, like it is getting thrown. But like the stuff they ran, it felt pretty similar, which is interesting. So let's get into, I think, probably the biggest concern with him, which is, at the beginning, you described him as kind of that gunslinger archetype. That is a double-sided coin. There are very few gunslingers that can play that way and not pay the tax of negative plays. And those are the guys who are in that top tier of quarterbacks in the NFL. It's the Mahomes, Allen, Lamar. Those are the guys that can do that without turning the ball over as often. Nussmeier's not in that group, and you see it. You see it on the college tape. We'll see it on a few clips. There are a lot of big negative plays, and there are some horrible decisions on tape.
Like, why did you ever think that would work? But
yeah, it's hard. It kind of reminds me. I think the guy it reminds me the most of, and I'm less confident that Nussmeier will fix it. It's kind of like Cam Ward to me, where it's not it's more so just like, hey, please stop making like one dumb, like horrible risk decision a game, than it is, oh, he's putting the ball in harm's way 10 times a game, and so a couple of them are going to happen. Like you're going to just run into a few interceptions. I don't really feel that way with Nussmeier, but if you're just consistently making the one horrible decision, at some point you have to stop assuming that it's going to get fixed. And he's played a couple seasons. He doesn't have a crazy amount of experience, but I don't think it's something to write off. Like, I think this will probably persist into his NFL career.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of defined by the way that he approaches the game and like the just his play style. Like he is going to make these throws, and I do think that it leads to a lot of positives because there are throws that he was attempting that Ty Simpson was not attempting. Like he saw some of the same or similar looks at times, and Ty was like bringing it back, holding on to it, and you saw that on the stat line where like Ty didn't throw for as many yards, he didn't throw as many interceptions either, but like it at times limits your big plays if you play that conservatively. But Nussmeier is willing to like push the ball, and it generates some big plays. But because of his lack of like superior arm talent, there were times where these kind of decisions, I think, obviously, anyone putting the ball in harm's way like this is going to lead to turnovers, but more so for a guy who does not have elite tools, where he has much less margin for error than a guy like Kim Ward who can like fire it in to those tight windows.
Yeah, aside from the horrible decisions, I think there's also times where he doesn't fully check his work against pressure. Sometimes there are times, and he's a really smart player, so I understand why he does this sometimes, but there's times where he thinks he knows what the defense is in, and then pressure comes and he kind of assumes what he's going to get and will force throws. And if defenders are actually playing good coverage, they'll pick it off. Like if the corner wins, at that point he's kind of just betting his receiver's going to win, and sometimes he's right, but there's plenty of those types of throws on tape, and he will just force throws. Sometimes we'll look at like probably the worst example of that you've ever seen in the Florida game.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it is like it's one like we'll get it. I'll save it for that. But there's a lot of that.
I want to use this as just a minute to say like for Kyron Lacey, awful what happened to him. Like really hate that for him and his family. I firmly believe that, like, watching this back again, I was like, Kyron Lacey would have been a good player in the NFL. Like, you saw it too many times on Nussmeier's tape. But Nussmeier, I think, understood that. Like, also with the other receivers at LSU. Like, he really trusted them to go make plays. And I think that's a good thing when you have guys that you can trust. And he clearly did. But there is a limit to, like...
All right, a little bit of an abrupt jump here. We had some storms come through, power outages. John's on his phone now, so a little bit of an awkward jump halfway through. But basically, we left off here talking about Nussmeier's weaknesses, focusing on some of the athletic limitations. On top of that, the main one just being the aggressiveness down the field, sometimes making poor choices. Talking about trust in his receivers, he certainly has a lot of trust in those guys. I remember Barry Brown, the extremely fast transfer from Kentucky. There's a couple times where he just dusts some guys off the line of scrimmage, and Nussmeier trusts him to throw up a 50-50 ball and let him go make a play. Sometimes that's a valuable thing on tape, but there are other times where that comes back to bite him, and DBs will make some big plays against him. Outside of that, John, anything else you would call out in terms of the negatives that you see from Nussmeier?
We talked about the average athleticism. I thought there were times where other quarterbacks might have taken off and run, and it would have been a good decision to. And I think he is really hesitant to do that.
Yeah.
And it's fine to want to be more of a passer, but at times when the yards are there and they're free yards, it's not like he's slow either. He's not a complete statue. He would have been better in some of those cases, just taking off and getting a few yards.
Agreed. He's a decent enough athlete where it should be a small part of his game. It's not just a complete non-starter like it is with some guys. So, yeah, completely agree there. I think the only other note I had was just his I thought the end of the year just got sloppy. I don't really know why that's the case. Maybe the injury was starting to weigh on him more. I just thought the tape was worse at the end of the year. And so I struggle with what to take away from that, with like LSU season kind of going down the drain, the injury probably progressively getting worse. Like there's a lot of factors in play there. I think that explains some of this. I mean, the coach getting fired, like, just, like everything around him was collapsing in addition to his health. So I don't think I penalize him for that as much as maybe guys in other situations, but it's certainly there on the tape. Like I think it clearly got a little bit worse towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think for the reasons you explained, and just like what all of that would do, not only to him personally, but also to the rest of the locker room. I thought you saw it affect some of the receivers as well, like the effort or some of the plays that they had been making before, they weren't there as well. So, I think that all of that kind of combined, it was just not a good situation for LSU last year. So it's at least understandable, even if it gives you a little bit of pause.
Agreed. All right, let's move into some clips. John's working off his phone, so who knows if you can even see what I'm going to be showing you, but we'll power through it and see what we can do. All right, first play here against Clemson. This is, I think, a good example of maybe not some of the positives you see with Nussmeier and also the weaknesses. This is a pretty typical play from Nussmeier in that he's being very aggressive over the middle of the field. So you see there's kind of three separate defenders that might have a chance to make a play on this ball. Nussmeier drops back, creates the throwing window, finds the right time for him to hit this throw. But you also see what we were talking about earlier, where he kind of throws to windows and sometimes that affects the accuracy. Here, I would probably prefer you to step into this a little more. He kind of steps around this throw. Mm-hmm. Because of that, the arm strength is not great. And so this ball kind of dies out, and Anderson has to go down to the ground and make a catch. I'm not sure they get a big gain out of this anyways, because the linebacker, 17, is kind of dropping into that area, and he probably has a chance to make a tackle here, but he gives his guy basically no shot at yards after the catch. So some positives you see from Nussmeier here, but also I think some concerns that show up on his tape.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like he was doing this pretty consistently. Like, and overall, you can't be too upset with the product because they got a lot of chunk yards out of these kind of plays, but in the end, some of the negatives show up and at least limit you from getting more, and potentially at times puts the ball in harm's way. And I think these windows, we talk about him like pushing it to tighter windows, like between three defenders here. Like these windows are going to get even tighter in the NFL, and I think that interception rate is concerning, and like it will probably be very high when he plays.
Yep. All right, another throw here against Clemson. Here you're going to see some more of the vision and the creativity. So this is an example of him rolling out, making a play outside of the pocket. We talked about some of this creativity before. This is the type of stuff that I really like to see on his tape. The whole time here, you don't even have to see the throw yet. Just watch his head and his eyes the whole time. The whole time he's running, he's scanning the field, looking for somebody to get the ball to. Identifies it. He knows he's got pressure coming, so he's got to jump and make a throw here. Delivers the ball right on the money. This is the kind of stuff that gets you pretty excited for a guy that doesn't have great tools. He still makes plays like this outside of the pocket that are pretty creative and just allow him to generate some bigger plays without having dominant physical tools.
Yeah, this is the good stuff with him, and I think that, like we talked about earlier, like these plays are going to be there. Like he just because of the type of play, the type of style he plays with, he's going to make some of these. So you just have to weigh, like, how much is this worth some of the negatives and the pushing the ball too much.
Yep.
And we'll see that. I guess one of those examples right here. It's just.
Yeah, this one is a positive. We'll get to one of the rough ones in a few minutes here. This is the example of the throw I was talking about earlier where he just rips one up the seam. So he identifies here that Castell, the safety, which also, before we even get to the throw, he sees this so quickly that he's got one-on-one in the slot and that Castell has committed to covering the the outside receiver over the top, which I'm not surprised because I think that's Barry and Brown, and like McClain is just not going to run with him. There's just no shot. So he identifies pretty quickly that the receiver in the slot here is in one-on-one coverage against the nickel corner. Ball's already out. Castell's like barely even taken a couple steps off the line, but Nussmeier leads him up the field. This ball actually gets dropped. Like, they don't convert this into a big gain, but this type of throw is just so nice. This is my favorite type of quarterback to watch. Is a guy who can like double pump here, identify what's there, and rip a throw up the seam. Like this is the fun part of Nussmeier's tape.
Yeah, and on this one, I think you see him kind of anticipating where the space is going to be, where the receiver is going to break open. He did this also. He did this consistently with guys who were like running routes before they made their break. He's throwing to the space where he knows they're going to break open. And this is when he's like at his best. Is when he's like he really feels it. He is able to process like where the open space is going to be, and he gets it there on time. He actually, I also, one other thing about this, I think you see him throwing to all different parts of the field with anticipation. He wasn't limited to like, he only wins in one area. He only wins throwing to one place. He actually like distributed the ball very evenly around.
Yep, agreed. The next two clips we'll have here are more negative. This is the very next drive, and this play is an example of where I think he doesn't really he panics a little bit against pressure, and when you have that in combination with not some plus tools, there's potential for plays made by the defense. This throw, I don't really mind this decision. Like, this, to me, is like a reasonable amount of separation to try to make this throw. The problem is he's on his back foot. So instead of this throw being accurate, and with a guy with a better arm, maybe it is, he's kind of backpedaling away from the pressure, tries to sidearm a throw, leaves it inside. That's a ball that could get intercepted if there's a better DB on the field there. There's a lot of these types of dangerous throws. I really don't hate the decision. He just doesn't always have the tools to, I should say, I don't hate the decision for Josh Allen. He just doesn't have those tools to always back that type of play up.
Yeah, it's like we were saying, like he does a good job moving around when there's space in the pocket. Keeping him clean, I think, is pretty important, because like when he's in the pocket, if he gets this kind of pressure in his face, he's not going to be able to just rip it from like falling off of his back foot. That's just not how he's going to win.
Yeah, it's when he can move forward and create windows. Like, if he can navigate it that way, he's got a chance. But yeah, he's not going to – it doesn't look great when he's falling backwards like this. And for most guys, it doesn't. We saw that with Mendoza as well. But it's certainly
not many guys have that kind of arm. Yeah.
All right, this is – well, hold on. Before we even get to this play, let's just take this in. Fourth quarter, 12 minutes left in the game, 2nd and 10 on the 16. So, like, you're in complete control of this game. With added context, on the other side, DJ Lagway, at this point in the game, has probably either 3 or 4 interceptions. I don't remember for sure. He's eventually going to find his way to 5. But the point is, the Florida offense has looked about as dead can be. They have done nothing the whole night. Lagway, might as well had a blindfold on in this game. And Nussmeier in this play makes one of the most baffling decisions that you will ever see. So here, he probably should just have stayed in the pocket here and hit this little throw. I guess the scoreboard here must have got cut incorrectly from a wrong play, because yes, this is 3rd down. So I take that back. But either way, like, you're in a fairly advantageous position. I think they took a big negative on 2nd down that pushed them back to 3rd down here. But a situation where you shouldn't be taking much risk. Nussmeier rolls out. I think there's a penalty on LSU here. So, like, again, probably a sign to just throw the ball away, because you're not getting anything out of this play anyways. The flag comes in. I don't know for sure if Nussmeier sees it. It looks to me like he sees it. I don't. Yeah, maybe he thinks this. Maybe the explanation here is I thought Florida got a penalty, so I just thought we had a free play. Honestly, might make sense based on how this play goes, because he rolls out and just chucks it behind the defender or behind the running back, like back towards the middle of the field. Maybe he does just think that they have a free play at this point, but it just looks extremely careless from him. He looks like he finds the running back and then leaves it inside. Dijon Johnson makes the pick. And this play, I remember, like when he got back to the sideline, Brian Kelly looked like he was about to murder him on the sideline.
Well, and he has a track record, so.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. Maybe you can explain this play away, but I think my bigger point with that would be there are decisions like this on tape from him. Whether you explain this one individually, how you decide to, this is a problem you see on his film. And a guy like him with limited physical traits cannot give away free plays to the defense because he's not going to make them up with the ridiculous high-end plays that some other guys might.
Yeah, this is one where I thought the same thing when I saw this play. I was like, you saw your right tackle hold right in front of you while you were rolling out, and then you saw immediately the flag come in. Like, maybe he does do a good job keeping his eyes downfield. Maybe he didn't understand that's what happened, but it just seems so obvious. Like, those two things happen back-to-back right in front of you, and then you're going to throw a crossbody behind the receiver, or the running back here, but, like, to the receiver here. Like, this was just, it made no sense at all. Like, that ball should have gone
10,
out of bounds.
Fourth quarter.
That ball should have just gone out of bounds. Like,
third and long.
Not a necessary risk. There's no upside there. Like, they weren't even going to get the first down. So
probably not even a field goal.
No, you see him in better situations also still throwing cross body where it's like he needs to minimize risk, because there are times where he finds windows, but it's like even then that's a dangerous throw. Like he was begging for more interceptions at times.
And it is like it's enough. He does it well enough where it's like I don't want him to completely turn it off. It's just some of those like obvious bad decisions where there it's like, what's the upside of completing that pass? You gain like 3 yards and then you kick a long field goal that you probably miss, right? Like there's those types of situations are the ones where it's like, this was not worth the cost of potentially, if you mess this throw up at all, it's a pick, right? Like there's no margin for error.
Yeah, you're just handing them free field position. Yeah. And if you do that enough, like you will lose games.
Yeah, which of course Florida did nothing with that and gave them the ball right back.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Ended up being fine, but yeah, it's not something you want to do consistently. All right, let's get into comps. I have one best case that came to me pretty quick. I am curious if we have the same guy here. I will start actually with my worst case, and then I'll throw it over to you for your comp. My worst case here, and this is basically just like an acknowledgement that this is the guy that I fall for all the time. My worst case for him is Clayton Tune, because I was probably too high on Clayton Tune. We haven't really seen him play, but I'm just going to go out and probably say that was likely. But same kind of guy, like rips throws over the middle of the field, super aggressive, questionable physical tools. And is that going to hold him back to the point where the mentality, the aggressiveness, all that stuff does not carry it forward to the next level? So that's my worst case. Kind of speaks again to like what my bias is in scouting quarterbacks, but that's the name I had with him. I'm curious where you're at for comps.
Yeah, I think that level is probably better than my worst case. My worst case, I said Nick Mullins, like this kind of guy who's going to be aggressive, going to push the ball, but it, and at times it can look really good. It's like, okay, there might be something there, but then it's just too much. It's too aggressive, and it leads to a lot of turnovers, and it's just not playable. But Nick Mullins might be more like like a little bit higher of an outcome, because like he still is kind of sticking around, and we'll see the field at times. So like that might be more like 25th percentile outcome than like absolute worst case.
I feel like we didn't. You just did. Stumbled upon something here. Like, would that not be a great pick for the Vikings in like the third round to put behind Kyler Murray? Like, if you're actually out on McCarthy at this point, which maybe they're not, maybe they want to give him some time. Like,
Yeah.
Murray's only on a 1-year deal, so it's possible he's not back next year, whether things go well or poorly. I can already picture. I mean, it's something about like the purple and gold
I was going to say,
translation.
he
like,
looks good in purple and gold, so you might as well
Justin
just keep
Jefferson's
going.
already there. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
He didn't. I don't even know if he overlapped with Jefferson at all. But like, it's the LSU connections
Probably
there.
didn't at this point.
But I do think he fits that type of offense, right? It's a guy that wants to take shots deep down the field, wants to be really aggressive and give his receivers chances to make plays. Like, I do think O'Connell would probably like him, and I think that would be an interesting fit and probably a good place for him to, not have to jump in and get thrown into the fire immediately, but have a real path to playing time. So, yeah, interesting there because I do think like that's when Mullins had his most success in Minnesota
I think that would
well.
I think that would be a really good fit for him, like that type of offense.
All right, my best case comp. Do you have a best case? Okay.
I don't love it, but I do have one. I said like Kirk Cousins type, where like he's not gonna wow you with the physical tools. There's like clearly some limitations there. Can play some like can look really good and competent at times, but then will out of nowhere have like the 3 interception game where it's like he loses you the game just because of how many turnovers he's gonna cause. Yeah, I don't love it, but that was like the best one that I could think of.
That makes sense. I do think it's like I agree that his ceiling is kind of in that range of player, which I think is kind of the most important thing to think about with the best case. Like I went with Baker just because I do think their body types are pretty similar. I also feel like Baker's a guy that really has to get his body into a throw to rip it, but he's super competitive, just like Nussmeier. He's willing to roll out, attempt, some sort of cross body throw to keep the play alive. Also, like both really smart quarterbacks. I think Baker is a little more physically gifted than Nussmeier, and it's just like he throws the ball harder. He's probably a little faster, which is why Baker was a first-round pick, first overall, and Nussmeier will not be. But if Nussmeier can rebound from the injury and his physical tools take a little bit of a leap in the NFL, he puts on some more weight. I do think the play styles are similar. I think if Nussmeier hit his ceiling, that's probably about the level of effectiveness we're talking about. And on top of that, Mayfield is a notoriously high sack, high turnover guy, and that always drags down some of his like EPA numbers to where if you look at like the touchdowns, the yards, it looks like a top 10 quarterback. You take the full picture and it's probably not because of some of the negative plays that come along with him. That part reminds me of Nussmeier.
Yeah, I actually thought about that one, and I think that one makes a lot of sense just from the build and like the ways that they have to win in the NFL. I do agree. I think Baker is actually physically a little more gifted than Nussmeier, but I think that you would see like a very similar ceiling and very similar like limitations to his game as well. So I think that ceiling around like the bottom of that middle tier of NFL quarterback, somewhere in there, is probably what you're looking at with Nussmeier if things work out for him.
Yep, and I will say, this is where we get into my bias. I would rather have this guy in the middle tier than the guy that is too scared to attempt throws. And
I agree.
I think you look at Sam Darnold this year. When stuff is right around him, when you have a number one receiver, when you have a really good offensive coordinator, when you have talent, there's a chance for the offense to reach a pretty high ceiling and for things to click. You even saw it with like the Bucs 2 years ago with Cohen and all those receivers, really good offensive line, strong run game. These type of guys, it doesn't necessarily mean they're top 10 quarterbacks, but they are gonna push the ball, and when they're on a really bad team, they're gonna look like a bust, like Sam Darnold, like Baker Mayfield. But it has a chance to work if if they're surrounded by good talent. That's true of pretty much all the guys in the middle range. But I just think with these guys, there's maybe a little higher ceiling with the outcome than some other guys that people would think about in that middle tier that might be a little more limited. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting part of it, and kind of goes into the like where you think the ceiling is and how effective he can be. But let's move to grades. Where did you end up with Nussmeier?
Yeah, so I kind of went back and forth, but when I weighed it in my mind, I would rather take this type of quarterback than Ty Simpson because I think that he showed more on tape. Where like Ty, he flashed some throws, but then there was a lot of inconsistent. There was a lot of erratic, like spraying throws, and even some of the athleticism that even though he's better and has a better arm, like some of that stuff just never really clicked. And I think Nussmeier showed a lot more consistently. He obviously has some limitations and some big question marks with the aggressiveness. So I kind of had him in that like mid to late second round range where like especially if you are a team in that range, you've already spent your first round pick, presumably on a more premier talent, or maybe traded it for a good player. We'll talk about if we do a mock draft. Like I don't know how many people are really picking in the first round this year, or I think there will be a lot of trades. But like if you feel good about that and you feel like you have a chance to put a talented quarterback, a guy who showed a lot of success in a good system with good talent around him in like that late second round range, I think that could end up working out really well for him.
I agree. I went back and forth between a late second and an early third like
Yeah.
10 times because I think I'm trying to not overrate him because I know that this is the type of guy that I want to like and
Yeah.
just appreciate the play style, the competitiveness, the aggressiveness, all that type of stuff. Like this is the type of quarterback that I like. I landed on a late second just because I do think that I think the makeup is pretty good for him. I think he will I think he'll still learn a lot in the NFL, and I do think there's still room for improvement for him. Like, remember last year we were talking about this guy is like, oh, he needs more experience. He needs to go back to school. He needs to develop more. Mm-hmm. It would be bad if he came out early. He probably gets drafted earlier if he just came out last year, which is what we never talk about the guys that go back to school and their stock drops. We only ever talk about the Cam Wards who go back to school and then end up having a great senior year. It happens with these guys too, where they go back, they get hurt, they have a tough year, and their stock falls. I still think Nussmeier has a lot of opportunity to improve because he only played 2 seasons, one of which was injury-ridden. I think there's still opportunity for growth there. And I do think these are the type of guys I'd rather take a bet on that have proven they can win from the pocket in their own way. There's real concern with me about this. Like, I don't feel confident that he's a really good starter, which is why I can't get any higher than a late second on him. I think there's just too much uncertainty to get any higher than that. But if somebody used the Tyler Shuck pick on him in this year's draft, like, wouldn't have any complaints about it.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I was thinking about that a little bit too, where it's like a second round pick on a quarterback. I don't think the expectations are that guy is definitely going to come in and start. He probably is expected to try to like compete for the job at least in his second year, but like I don't think you're picking Nussmeier expecting him to like come in and save your team this year, and like he absolutely has to start. But I think that you have at least some upside with him there that he could come in and be a really good quarterback. But yeah, I think overall for me it was like I was concerned with the interceptions. I was concerned with some of the limitations, but I think that there is something there, and I think that somebody will probably take a shot on it.
Agreed. I think like you said, I think he's close enough to ready to play where something like what the Saints did makes sense, where you don't have to hand him the job right away in his rookie year. But if you're a team that needs a quarterback, I'd be willing to take a shot on this late second, early third and see if it works. And then maybe next year you don't have to trade multiple first-round picks to go get a quarterback in the first round. So, yeah, I think it's worth a shot. I feel the same way about – I mean, I don't have him and Simpson that different, right? Like they're pretty close. I definitely would prefer Nussmeier from the play style, and I feel a little better about him about the bottom not falling out with him and like him at least having like a baseline level of competence. But
Yeah.
if you are a team that's chasing ceiling in this range, you probably are going Simpson because the arm talent's just better. Some of the physical tools are better. So
Agreed.
I am very curious to see, like, maybe we're just off from how the NFL feels about Simpson. It only takes one team. I would not be surprised if these guys go pretty close together on day 2 of the draft. So, yeah, very curious to see how this unfolds.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Nussmeier. I hope he finds a good landing spot. But with these guys, it makes a big difference where you end up.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we'll see with the NFL, like sometimes the tools just went out. Like from some of the things that I've heard recently, like Ty, I think will still probably go first round just because of the tools, and Nussmeier will not because he doesn't have those tools. But when it came down to it, I preferred his style of play overall to Ty's.
All right. That'll do it for today's episode. Who knows how many of these guys we're going to get to in the next week before the draft, but we'll do our best. I blame my actuarial exam in March that we're behind, but we'll knock out as many of these as we can before the draft. And I will at least try to cover all the guys that get drafted. If there are a few that were on my initial list that maybe we don't get to, I will at least plan to hit on the drafted guys either before or after. And we'll probably come back with a mock draft sometime next week as well. So looking forward to that. John, thanks again for joining in, for fighting through some technical difficulties tonight. Went half computer, half phone tonight, but thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, and thanks everybody for listening. Continue to tune in. We'll have more episodes coming soon, and we'll catch you all next time.